Word on the street regarding health is hydrate, so why not get some other benefits too? The new word is live, spelled L-I-V. So get out and live life well with products and systems made with new technology that you simply add to or take with water. You hydrate, lose weight, cleanse your system, gain energy, and it is all natural. Go to mylivezone.com/DAP. Live, L-I-V, zone.com/DAP. Well, as part of our HPU preview, if you will, here on the Dave and Tiff Sports podcast, we have the women's basketball head coach, Reid Takatsuka, joining us here. And Coach, first of all, thanks for joining us. And I know you have moved on from last season. I know that. But for me, I am still a little bit wrenched because, last season, first of all, the last 4 years, I was looking it up. You and your program has just been on fire, to say the least. Over the last 4 years, all 20-plus win seasons. Last season, of course, the Pac West tournament and regular season champions, ranked number 6 nationally, number 1 seed going into the West, hosting the NCAA tournament, West Regional, and just literally on the eve, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the eve of the first game of the tournament was the announcement that due to the pandemic, it was being shut down. And we talked with head coach Darren Vorderbergy, and he was so excited for you guys leading up to this because, as Tiff has in his background, first season with your own facility, and there was a previous year, I believe it was 2017, 2018, where you guys were the number 1 seed in the West. But because you didn't have your facility, you had to go on the road. But in D2, if you're the number 1 seed in your region, you get to host. So here was this excitement to host the NCAA tournament, number 1 seed, only 1 loss in the season, and it gets literally like a punch in the gut. Okay, so I got all that off my chest. Did it get off your chest quicker than I did for you last season?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. As far as this past season, it obviously stayed with me for a while, and obviously, I think from my standpoint, it hurt more because I know how much it hurt my players. I know how excited it was for them to be hosting, and I think as a program, we all felt like we had the opportunity to win the region and move on and advance much further into the NCAA tournament. And I think all the things that happened, obviously, it was necessary. I think the safety of our players and, our school and just the state, I think was first and foremost. And I think, when you look at both sides of, the argument, it was a little easier to kind of get past it, knowing that, my players were safe and, we were moving in a direction that was going to kind of keep the state healthy and our program healthy.
Yeah, I tried to think that way too, and I did my best.
Didn't work out very well.
Yeah, it just kills me. And by the way, I mentioned just a little while ago how your team has really been on fire. I mean, your career, Coach, has been just astounding, but especially the last 4 seasons. I just want to bring it out. 99-21 over the last 4 years. That's a .825 winning percentage. Pac West champions, of course, last year. Tournament champions the year before. Pac West regular season in 2018. Made the NCAA tournament in 2017. You are just behind Vince Gu in terms of number of wins for women's basketball for college in the state of Hawaii. I know you're one of those that don't look at all that kind of stuff, but when you kind of capsulize it, what I just said, is it one of those things where you're like, well, it was a lot of work, but I'm glad we're here, or, hey, that's what we should be. I mean, how do you kind of look at all of that?
It's interesting because obviously when I hear the numbers, it's extremely surreal. Because I literally do not look at the numbers. I understand what our teams have accomplished over the last so many years, but from a personal standpoint, I mean, it's important, I guess, now that I'm hearing it, but at the same time, it doesn't resonate with me as I go into each season. Um, or even as I sit down and even think about seasons, I never think about records for whatever reason. I think the thing that I reflect on most as I look at past teams are the players that have come through the program. And I think a lot of the success that we've had as a program is because I think the kids that we've been bringing in are such great kids that it's just made my job significantly easier, you know. And as far as like where we are now, I think there's, you know, we've talked about it recently with our team now that there's I think a greater responsibility to maintain a level or a standard of excellence, being that, you know, the former teams or the former players have kind of built the foundation for this team. And whether it's in a, you know, COVID era or, you know, a normal year, you know, there's some expectations that are in front of us.
Coach, you talked about players that have come through the program, and then also how you felt bad more for your players than you did for yourself after, you know, the pandemic shut down the Pac-West or the NCAA West Regional. To have a player like Star Rivera come through the program, not get a chance in the West Regional to continue her career, what can you say about having those local players that might not be the tallest, but have some of, you know, that have basically the most heart, you could say?
I think, you know, in Star's case, you know, what's interesting is that, you know, during this time, we've had obviously a lot of opportunity to reflect, and you know, Star's name has come up quite a bit, you know, and talk about a huge blessing for our program. And you know, not just the fact that she's a local kid that did, I mean, extremely well for our program, but just a great representation and just a good person, you know, and legitimately, like in Star's case, you know, just, I mean, even now as I'm talking about it, still feel bad about it, you know, because the year that she was having, she was our leading scorer, you know, last year. And to reflect on where she came from and where she ended up, I just wish that, you know, we had that opportunity to keep moving forward, because I mean, it would have been a pretty awesome story for her, you know, in spite of, you know, all the things that happened. If we could have just kept going, you know, I think that would have been a pretty neat story.
You're born and raised here. You live out in Kaneohe, and you know you're an alum of HBA, and there's another HBA alum who's doing quite well on the women's circuit. Talking about Jeff Harada up at Cal State Fullerton. To have a couple of head coaches with Hawaii ties, you included, what does it mean for Hawaii coaches to be doing well on the collegiate level, and then both to be able to say we're HBA alums?
Well, I mean, I just think that, I mean, coming from a small school like Hawaii Baptist Academy, I think it's pretty awesome that, you know, Jeff and I have been able to get, you know, not quite the biggest stage, obviously professional basketball, but I think that on the collegiate level, it's you know, pretty remarkable that he's at a Division I school right now and he's doing extremely well. And you know, from my standpoint, I like to think that we're doing okay, and I take, you know, and I talk to Jeff every week, and, you know, obviously we don't forget where we came from. And I think we take a great amount of pride in where we came from, and Hawaii is home. And even though he's in California right now, I mean, you know, we are in constant communication and we're always talking about home. And I think it's exciting from my standpoint to see where he is. I am looking forward to him being successful at every single level that he's at, so it's pretty exciting for me to see what he's doing at Cal State Fullerton.
We're talking with Reid Takatsuka, the head coach of women's basketball at HPU. And first of all, let me get this very important question off my chest. You used to coach my co-host here, Tiff Wells, back in the day. And there was legend that I'd heard, so you got to clarify this, that back in the day, a young Tiff Wells who could walk in the gym apparently had some hops where he could touch the backboard where that white square is up above the rim. Is that true, or is that more legend?
I'm gonna say that it's mostly true. I was with Tiff and coaching him in high school, and he was a baller, man. He was getting it done. He knows what he's doing.
Oh, was it more?
We got to be talking about rims that are maybe 7 feet high, because then you could just reach up and touch that backboard. And that's if we're talking, if that's legendary status, or if it really happened, if it's a 7-foot rim, I can touch that backboard. But getting to 10, no.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, Tiff. You're being modest, man.
The next question would have been, was it more elbows or actual defensive footwork? But that's for another show. A little bit about last year's team as we segue into looking at this year's group, because last year's team was a young team. I believe only one senior with Star Rivera. So considering the success that you had last year, what's the look for this group for this coming season?
I think, obviously, again, going back to expectations, I think the expectations and the standards haven't changed. I think the challenge for us right now is with coronavirus. We've had a few players opt out, so it's kind of changed the way we look. And right now we're just trying to figure out how to fill in the gaps, which players are gonna be able to step into some big roles, and kind of see what the season has in store for us. We're not really sure at this point, so we're just preparing as if we're going to have a season, and only time will tell. I mean, we're still fairly young, only 3 seniors, so I think that there's still some moments of looking pretty good, but we're a work in progress for sure.
Now, one scenario that we've heard, and obviously it hasn't been totally confirmed yet, is that the season will be played in some geographic pods. So that would mean there's a Hawaii pod of you guys, UH Hilo, and Chaminade, and just playing amongst each other. And then, of course, that's not confirmed, and there may be other scenarios. But if it were to be a Hawaii pod, playing 2 teams over and over reminds me of like KIF football. On Kauai, you're playing 2 teams over and over again. And I'm guessing if you were to look at that as Plan A possibility, that lends the coach to have a lot more work in terms of motivation, because it's one thing to have strategy and game planning for multiple opponents, but when it's 2, that might be a challenge. Is that a challenge for you if that be the case?
I think it's a huge challenge. I think it's a huge challenge in large part because, if you had to play the same teams, let's just say hypothetically 3 times, 4 times within a season, I think that, different emotions or factors can come into play. And I just think you hit the nail on the head, just trying to motivate them to get up for the same team that you just saw maybe a week ago, and then knowing that you're going to play them again in another several weeks. I think it's extremely difficult. And I think it's difficult to get excited. Even if it was, going to Northern California and playing the same teams over and over again, I think it would be difficult, and I just think that finding that motivation to get up for the same teams over and over again is probably the biggest challenge for sure.
Coach, you've been able to not only have 4-year players, but also have the ability to bring in those transfers from the Division I level. When you look at the transfer portal, and that's something everybody's been talking about the last couple of years, when you look at the portal and you're looking at players and stats and what schools they're transferring out of, what do you look for to maybe then ask them to see if they're interested in coming to HPU?
I think the biggest thing, the first thing that I bring up with all players is whether or not they're going to be okay with the distance of living in Hawaii. And I think the easy answer for a lot of kids is, well, what's not to like about Hawaii? But the fact of the matter is you're 2,500 miles away, possibly more, it will affect how you feel at some point, homesickness or just a different culture or whatever it may be. And I think, once we can get past the distance and the travel, I think a big thing for me is looking for kids that fit into our system. I look for kids that can kind of do the things that I like to do as a coach. And at that point, kind of get a feel for whether or not their goals are in line with our goals as a program. I think a lot of times with transfers, they have goals in mind, and a lot of times it doesn't necessarily line up with our team goals or our program goals. I'll give you an example. We had a kid that I was extremely interested in, a D1 kid, and her mindset was she wanted to start and she wanted to play 30 plus minutes. But if you look at our team last year, and I was honest with her, you're not going to start, you're not going to get those kind of minutes knowing the kids that I had coming back. And last year's team was 29-1. And I think that, under the certain, she obviously moved on and went to a different school, but, there was no place for her to start. We just had too many good players in place at that time. So I think you have to line up the players' needs and wants versus or against the program's kind of goals and needs. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Reid Takatsuka joining us here on the Dave and Tiff Sports Podcast, head coach of the HPU women's basketball team. By the way, 29-1 last season. That one loss that you alluded to came on a last-second shot with 0.7 seconds left. I believe it was a layup. So you're really 0.7 seconds from an undefeated season. So not to kind of add
you can tell
more
he's not happy about that still.
Yeah, add more to the gut punch. But last question, Coach. You're one of the few, and I talked to you about this before a game broadcast, and you told me the answer, and I thought it was interesting. But you're one of the few, if not the only, basketball coaches I've seen that actually stands at the end of the bench. And you joke to me that some of your friends and say, why are you paying any attention? Are you just talking to the trainer at the end of the bench? But you have a reason why is it that you stand at the end versus like most coaches stand toward the front?
So the main reason is that when I was working for Jeff Harada, ironically, he was a guy that would coach standing up a lot of the, throughout the game. And a lot of times as I'm sitting next to him in the seat next to his, he would stand up and I could not see what was happening because he was standing right in front of me. And a lot of times I'm having to move back and forth trying to, take a look at the play, and he'd turn around and he'd ask me a question. And there were times that I didn't see what happened because he was standing right there. And so for me, when I first started, I just decided that I would stand at the end. That way my players and my assistants could see everything that was happening. And so if I did happen to ask my assistants, for an adjustment or something that was going on in the game, they actually could see what was happening. The other thing is I like to stand at the end of the bench as well because, it gives me an opportunity to watch my players on the bench. Not that I'm, watching them and not watching the game, but it gives me an opportunity to see how engaged they are. And it also gives me an idea of who I may want to sub into the game. If they're into it, if some players may be daydreaming, I don't know, so it's kind of my way. It's definitely not traditional, but it works for me.
I would say it works, especially in your
29-1, yeah, 22-0 in the conference. It works.
Yeah, I'd say it's a positive thing. And plus, like you said, it keeps the players on the bench on their toes because they know coaches behind them kind of watching them. And, that's just like a teacher in class who stands at the back of the room. He's kind of like making sure everything's good. Hey, Coach, I want to thank you for taking some time. We look forward to this new season. Granted, there's not going to be any fans in the Shark Tank, but congratulations on last year, definitely, and good luck for your season this year.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man. Good seeing you guys, too.
All righty.
Thanks, Coach. Hope to see you soon.